Hello, and welcome back to A Better World. This is your host, Mitchell J. Rabin, and we're very glad that you're joining us again today. Today we're going to have another very interesting show. We have invited back Dr. Rob Young, who is a microbiologist and has been doing some pioneering work in the field of health and understanding disease. And as far as I'm concerned, Rob Young has explained the nature of disease better than anyone else I have ever come across. He'll be sharing with us his understanding of the causes of all diseases, not just one or two, but that is the nature of disease. And, thank God, what we can do about it. How we can take measures in our own lives by changing our habits. Oy, oy, oy. Not that. Yes, changing our habits and coming around to eating healthy, alkalizing foods and all the other related solutions that he has come up with after many years of arduous research into the nature of what creates a healthy cell and a diseased one. So Rob, we're so glad to have you on again.
Thank you.
It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
Good, good. Did I hit all the right notes?
I think so.
Okay, good, good. Would you please just tell us, first of all, how is it that, we're going to go right into it because people have gotten to know you already over the past couple of years, and I really want to go right into the body of work that you have been spending so much time on. Also, let me say that Rob Young is the scientist behind Inner Light International, which is a company that is dedicated to the promotion and promulgation of health, healthy ways of life, and providing the world with forms of supplementation that kind of pick up where the soil leaves off.
Okay.
That could be a slogan, you know?
Yeah, it sounds
Pick
good.
up where the soil leaves off. Anyway, would you just tell us, Rob, in kind of an encapsulated form, what is it that causes disease? The world is falling apart. Everybody's ill. What's this about?
Well,
most everyone.
Very simply, it comes about with the disturbance of the central balance of any organized matter. And when you have that disturbance, whether you're picking an apple or a banana or an orange from a tree, you take it from its life source. And at that particular instance, once it's been picked, it begins its cycle or recycling of going back to the earth again. So it disorganizes.
So it goes from fertile and ripe into a condition of decay.
Right.
Increasing decay.
And that decaying process is a fermentation process. And during the fermentation process, once organized matter has been disturbed, creates specific acids that are unique to those particular organized matters. We're familiar with acids such as lactic acid. When our cells go from a respiratory state, which produces energy, and goes into a, let's say, a fermented state, which produces lactic acid. And lactic acid is the acid that's always associated and always is around and about any form of cancer in the human body. And so it is a process, cancer is a process of fermentation of cells which have been disturbed and begin to disorganize. And through this disorganization, those anatomical elements which make up those organized cells go from a state of oxygen and producing energy to a state of fermentation.
Which is a state of equilibrium as well.
Right, it's a state of homeostasis. Go from that state to a state of disorganization, adapting to its environment. And so we end up with morbid forms. I think in several of the past shows we talked about how these anatomical elements which make up healthy cells can disorganize and become unhealthy through this process of fermentation and produce morbid forms that we refer to as germs, such as bacteria, E. coli, or even fungal forms, i.e. Candida albicans and some other 500 different trillion diversities that they can become. And so the latest...
variations on a theme, basically.
Yeah, the latest is the Pfiesteria germ that's found in our polluted waters that's, I believe, is an evolution of, that is literally coming from out of the fish that's born in these
polluted waters?
Polluted waters that's born right within that species. And so we're getting new germs all the time. New germs which are literally coming out of are healthy cells. And so there's a healthy form and an unhealthy form of every cell. But
So from that point of view, cancer in a sense is an adaptation to a disturbed condition.
yeah, it's a symptomology of a changing environment. Cancer is not a noun, but it's an adjective. It's a representation of cells which are changing their form and function due to the disturbance. And the acids...
So it's a reaction.
Right.
It's a symptom of the primary problem, which is acidification.
Yeah. There's a lot of ways you can disturb things. For Muhammad Ali, his particular symptomology was taking too many blows to the head, causing a disturbance which disorganized brain cells, and they begin to change their form and function, and what you end up with is a rotten brain, or a moldy brain, or a brain which is just not functioning properly. And you can do this externally or internally. We know that in the case of Mickey Mantle, he disturbed his central balance of his liver by drinking alcohol. And we know that alcohol is an acid that's produced through fermentation, and that alcohol can further disturb by penetrating cell membranes, disturb genetic material that can destroy cells that make up our organs. And so it's a process of fermentations that we're eating, and it's a process of fermentations that we're creating within. An example of that would be the symptomologies of chronic fatigue. Chronic fatigue is a fermentation on the glucose. When these morbid forms that are created from within ferment our glucose, they produce acids such as acetaldehyde, which also breaks down to alcohol. And we know that acetaldehyde, which is highly poisonous, when we water that down, is nothing more or less than vinegar. And of course, you can count our food stuff. That's just another toxin that we ingest that's also created within the human body as well. So the body's constantly trying to eliminate these acids that are born within us, and if it doesn't, then we end up with these acids stored. The body will release low-density lipoproteins, cholesterol to bind these acids, and so we end up with high cholesterol, which is a result of excess acidity. We end up with calcium deposits to neutralize, let's say, oxalic acid, which is a ferment. So we end up with symptomologies of gout, or we'll end
arthritis,
or we'll end up with calcium deposits on our joints, and so they creak a little bit, and we end up with gallstones or brain stones or breast stones, all the neutralizations, or even cataracts, which are the neutralization of these acids that are built up once cells are disturbed.
It's the body's attempt to neutralize the effect of acid, acid, excess acid in the body.
Right.
So, I'm going to just kind of synthesize the point, which is most people think of diseases, yes, as nouns, number one, rather than as adjectives, or for that matter, really a verb, because everything is actually in motion. Everything's in process. But nonetheless, it's not a thing, sort of an end result as we think of it. It's really a symptomatology of the primary problem, which is the disturbance which occurs through acidifying.
Yeah, physical or emotional stresses can be emotional too as well, can create acidity.
Can create acidity, sure. It taxes the liver, taxes the kidney, etc., the adrenals, etc. But the point is that what we refer to so solidly and knowingly as cancer, what you're really saying is that it is really a symptom of the body's attempt to neutralize itself, neutralize the acids that have been released as a result of a series of disturbances.
Right. Yeah. Another way to say it is once we have the disturbance in the central balance of any organized matter, wherever it may be in our body or even other living things, there is an overacidification. And this is due to an inverted way of living and eating, which causes this rise of morbid forms that we refer to as germs, which literally come out of these healthy forms of cells. So what I've documented in my research is red blood cells.
They're a mutation of the healthy form.
There are evolutions where you'll actually see, I'll actually see bacterial rods growing right out or being formed right out of the erythrocytes, which are the red blood cells. In the same instance, I'll also see red blood cells go through a process of de-differentiation, which is despecialization, back to an embryonic state. They have the ability, because they contain all the information to build a body is contained in one cell.
Right.
Some of its aspects are on and some of them are off. And if they're turned on, they can differentiate into bone cells, nerve cells, muscle cells.
Whatever's needed.
Whatever's needed. So these anatomical elements, which are indestructible, which are the precursors to all of our DNA, which God refers to as from dust we are, and from dust we will return. Gaston referred to them as somatids. Enderlin referred to them as the proteid. God, as I've mentioned, refers to them as dust. We are the earth, and we return to the earth, and these elements are literally indestructible. And so I think in terms of life and death, I think in different terms, that when we're looking at life, we're looking at organization, and when we're looking at death, we're looking at disorganization. But there's still life there. Even in the cremated body, we can see these anatomical elements, sparkling, glittering, moving. They're disorganized, but there's still life there. And with that, of course, is the mineral constituents. But
other words for that that people are familiar with are integration and disintegration. You've got a form, and it's an integrated whole.
Right.
And with the onset of decay or fermentation, you will get disintegration.
Another perfect example of that would be spinach. There's this misconception that spinach contains oxalic acid, and that is not the case. Oxalic acid is only created once the spinach has been disturbed, the cells. But if you pick fresh spinach, you cannot find a trace of oxalic acid. It's only when the spinach starts breaking down and those cells that make up that organized matter start changing their form and function and go through this disorganization or disintegration process that the acids start bringing it back to dust. And so, you know, if you cook the spinach, then of course you're going to disturb it even further. Not only are you going to disturb it, but you're going to create acids, and at the same time it's going to start losing its electromagnetic energy, its life force.
It's negative charge.
It's negative charge. That charge, which is always negative, which represents life itself, will change to a positive charge and losing its life-giving properties.
Its integrity.
Its energy. We talk about foods that have energy and foods that have life, bodies that have life. These are highly alkaline bodies that carry highly electrical negative charges. There's subtle energies, yes. And once we have disturbance, then we have disorganization, and we have the acids, which are positively charged, and we end up going through what is known as in biology as the carbon cycle. So.
Now, you referred before to lactic acid, Rob. Now, athletes know, and others who exercise know, that lactic acid is a result, is it not, of the normal body's movement and use. So lactic acid is a natural byproduct, is it not, of,
lactic acid
muscular use?
Lactic acid is the creation of the process of the body trying to produce energy in the presence of oxygen, which it does very well as it burns glucose or fats to produce ATP energy.
Right.
And when oxygen is depleted, even though both of these are fermentation process, the energy is produced through a fermentation process either in the presence of oxygen or in the absence of oxygen. When oxygen is depleted, then of course it goes into an excess fermentation state, producing an acid rather than an energy, an ATP energy.
Oh.
So lactic acid is a result of an athlete who has gone into oxygen deprivation, oxygen debt, into an anaerobic state, thereby going into a catabolic state. And it's catabolic because these acids which are produced once oxygen is deprived is thrown out because the blood has to maintain its integrity in an alkaline state at 7.365. It throws these acids into the tissues, and therefore the athlete feels the pain and aches and soreness of anaerobic or oxygen-deprived exercise. That's why exercise can be detrimental to your health if it's done in excess. Of course, anything in excess, eating in excess, exercising in excess, sleeping.
How about eating raw in excess?
Anything in excess. I mean, when you talk about the ancients and those like the Hunses that have lived for many, many years, and other civilizations that have had long lives, the one thing that they have had in common is the quality of their foods and the quantity has been minimal. The one thing they all have in common is they don't overeat. And overeating, here again, is an excess, which creates excess fermentation, which can and does create excess fermentation or acids that can poison our cells and make us sick and tired, which throws us into what I call the cycle of imbalance, which is the new paradigm through my research, which I've developed, a new paradigm for sickness and disease, which is represented in overacidification, infestation. So overacidification, due to these conditions that we've been talking about, the disturbances, infestation, which gives rise to these morbid forms. And I use the word morbid because there's intermediate stages and final stages. The intermediate stages are all the bacterial forms, and the final stages are all the yeast and fungi that develop. And so these morbid forms are born within us. We don't catch these. I'm not saying you can't.
Okay.
But I'm saying they do go airborne as well, but disease begins from within us.
Based on the condition of the terrain.
Based on the terrain, not from without. So
that is the body.
Yeah, so the biological terrain, if the body is in balance, there's no disease that can exist in the body. But this cycle of imbalance, which is acidification, infestation, and the destruction or disturbance of the cells, with each revolution, then we see symptomologies to a lesser or greater degree, depending on how we're abusing our bodies emotionally or physically. The common thinking person, it makes sense to them. It rings true because it is true. But in these cycles, I've got two cycles. The cycle of imbalance, which I've described, there is the opposite of that, because there's opposition in all things. And the opposite of imbalance is balance. And it's not to treat any of these specific diseases or to cure them, because this can be fatal. But to bring our body...
It has often been.
Many of us die from the treatment rather than the cause, or I should say the symptomology. But if we can bring our bodies back into balance through how I've described in my books, particularly this new book which I have, Sick and Tired, Reclaim Your Inner Terrain. It should be released shortly, but I've described this cycle of balance of being the first phase of cleansing, cleansing the inner organs, all the tissues, the blood, the intercellular fluids, and then to control and not to kill these morbid forms, because you can't kill that which has not been created nor can be destroyed. It's always existed. All it does is it changes its form or function. Antibiotics, you say, well, I take antibiotics, that will kill this bacteria. This is not true. All they do is duck out of the way. They just change their form and function. They adapt, and so what we read in the newspaper is the overuse or the abuse of antibiotics and the rise of these so-called superbugs. And there's no such thing happening. All that's happening is these forms are either evolving or de-evolving based upon their environment conducive. And so the cycle of balance...
Just like Beauchamp said at the turn of the century, before that.
Well, yeah, the germ is nothing, the terrain is everything.
That's right.
And
let it be known that the person who began the entire germ theory way back when, Louis Pasteur, took it back. But the pharmaceutical industry didn't listen, because there wasn't the same kind of profit involved in not looking for the germ and in coming up with solutions to the germ, meaning another drug for any germ that's out there. He took his words back, and nobody listened.
Yeah, so
some did.
Yeah, and so I've developed a new paradigm for health in this cycle of balance. Rather than treating, rather than drugging, the process
You support the terrain.
You support the terrain. You take it out of an acid state. You neutralize the acids. You control the acids. You control these acids, which are referred to as mycotoxins, exotoxins, and endotoxins, and you neutralize them. You change the environment. It's kind of like if you have garbage and you take it out and put it in the garbage can, you see, the way to get the flies from surrounding the garbage is you get the garbage man to take the garbage away, and then the flies go away. So if you have garbage in your inner environment, inside your body,
you're going to attract flies.
You're going to attract morbid forms. You're going to attract parasites. When you change the environment, then these morbid forms change their form and function. They literally pack their bags and they leave. So the second stage of this cycle of balance is control. The third stage is to construct new and healthy cells. And in constructing new and healthy cells, you have to give the body what it needs. And what it needs are live foods. What it needs are green foods. And
chlorophyll-based.
Chlorophyll-based foods.
Oxygen-based.
Oxygen-based, live foods. Foods that are not cooked, not processed. Foods that contain a high electrical negative charge, that bring energy and life, subtle energies to the body, that have all the amino acids, that have the vitamin and mineral contents, that have the chlorophyll. And you can find those in all the grasses. The wheatgrass, the barley grass, the oat grass, the straw grass, the dog grass. Sounds like a song. You know,
from Utah.
Anyway, from Utah, I can make a song about the grass. But grass will bring life. I think we talked about this in one of our past shows. The word for grass in Hebrew, if I hopefully pronounce this correctly, is Dalet Shem Aleph, and loosely translated, that means
those are the letters. Yeah.
That which will bring you eternal life, and so there's life there.
That's right. That's right.
But the cycle of balance is the new paradigm which I've developed for teaching and helping people how to empowering people to take charge of their lives, as not only
their
physically,
inner environment,
emotionally take charge of that, so they can enjoy a higher quality and quantity of life.
Sure. Sure, absolutely. Why don't you tell us in the remaining minutes, since you brought us into the Hebrew, would you just tell us the story of Daniel?
Well, I don't have my Bible with me, but
I didn't expect you to say it in Hebrew or Aramaic.
No,
but
I could tell you my version of it. But Daniel the prophet was taken captive into Babylon and thrown into prison by the king, Nebuchadnezzar. And while he was there, he was offered the king's food, and he was offered the king's meat, and he was offered the king's wine, and he refused that. He said to the eunuch, "Bring me pulse and water." And my understanding of pulse, once again loosely translated, is
from Hebrew. Yeah.
Hebrew is that which comes from seed. And when I think about that, my interpretation is that that's all the live foods, those which have been sprouted.
The grasses.
The
right?
grasses.
Sprouted.
Yeah. So bring me grass and water. That would be my interpretation of that. And the eunuch was very fearful to do that, because he felt like if he offered grass and water to Daniel, he would be weak and unable to fight. I think they were throwing him in the lion's den and fighting the lions. But anyway, he was very fearful that he'd lose his own life. And Daniel said, "Give me 10 days and prove me herewith that if I'm not as strong as any one of those who are eating the king's meat and drinking the king's wine." And so after 10 days, he was brought the pulse and the water, and after 10 days he was found to be as strong as those that were eating the king's meat and drinking the king's wine. So he was allowed to do so for approximately 3 years.
If not stronger, actually. Yeah.
After 3 years. And after 3 years he was presented to King Nebuchadnezzar, and he was found to be 10 times stronger and 10 times wiser than anyone in the land. Now that's a nice story, but for those on the spiritual or philosophical level, would say, yes, we believe in the Bible. I believe in that, that makes sense to me. I can see why that can be. We look at the strongest animals in the world, and what do they eat? They eat grass, leaves, roots, seeds, and it's interesting that biologically, all of these foods are very high in all the amino acids. In fact, wheatgrass happens, 1 ounce of wheatgrass happens to be equal to a 12-ounce steak as far as its amino acid profile. And so there's no doubt in my mind, if you want to build strong, healthy bodies, that Daniel's diet and pulse and water and the cycle of balance biologically is the zone.
Yes.
Is the true zone,
Yeah.
and is the correct nutrition, and that's what we need to encourage our families, particularly our children, who are literally being laden with sugar foods, high fructose corn syrup. We're killing our children. ADD, attention deficit disorders, and hypertensions, hyper disorders are on the rise.
Sure.
Because of all the sugar that's in our diets. And of course, as I've mentioned before, sugar is the first ingredient that ferments, that produces acids that give us all these aches and pains and disorders. Neurological toxins, we can call them, and they're literally making us all go crazy.
That's right.
Driving
the world mad.
Driving the world mad. So I truly believe in what I'm teaching. And a lot more of this information, as I've discussed, is contained in my books and in my tapes and are available, but it's exciting to be able to offer this message to the world.
God bless you for doing so. We greatly appreciate it. We really do. Let's show your book,
All right.
The one that's available now. One sickness, one disease, one treatment. And it's all within your grasp. Actions that you can take yourself without the need for doctors or professionals of any sort. Really, you can rely upon yourself and common sense with some guidance to take care of your health and deal with some debilitating illnesses that you may have. So thanks again, Rob.
You're welcome.
This is Mitchell J. Rabin for A Better World. We're so glad that you joined us. Do feel free to call 212-420-0800. Get more information about what Dr. Young is presenting us here with. And I look forward to seeing you all next week.